Welcome to The Mirage and the Truth. Today, we're embarking on a truly profound spiritual journey to explore one of the most revered, absolutely fascinating figures in the entire Quran. We are going to look closely at the life, the monumental trials, and the ultimate elevation of Maryam, who you probably know in the Western world as Mary. Throughout this explainer, we'll be zeroing in on her totally unique status, her miraculous experiences, and her enduring legacy as this ultimate symbol of pure devotion. O Mary, God hath chosen thee and purified thee, chosen thee above the women of all nations. I just want you to take a second and let the sheer weight of that verse from Surah 3, Ayat 42, really sink in. You see, this isn't just a casual statement of praise. It's a definitive divine decree establishing her supreme, totally unmatched spiritual status. Out of all the women in human history, the text is elevating Maryam to this absolute pinnacle of purity and divine favor. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that out of the entire Quran, which remember is a text spanning thousands of verses and detailing the histories of so many prophets and nations, Maryam is the only woman directly named. Not once, but repeatedly. Other women are referenced by their titles or who they're related to, like the Queen of Sheba or the wife of Pharaoh. But Maryam, she stands completely alone. She's actually mentioned by name far more times in the Quran than she even is in the New Testament. In fact, she has an entire chapter, Surah 19, named after her. It's a remarkable fact that really hits the nail on the head regarding her unparalleled significance. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to trace the chronological arc of her life today. We'll go from the initial vow made by her mother all the way to her secluded sanctuary, the angelic annunciation, the incredibly profound ordeal of her childbirth, and then finally wrap up with her eternal legacy. Part 1, the vow and the dedication, the wife of Imran. So our narrative actually begins not with Maryam herself, but with her mother, the wife of Imran. The texts tell us that Maryam's spiritual journey was set in motion before she even took her first breath. Her mother, who was deeply devout, made this profound prayer, dedicating whatever was growing in her womb entirely to God's special service. Now, she was expecting a male child, because that was the custom for temple service back then, but she didn't waver for a second when she delivered a girl instead. Despite the societal norms of the time, the Quran tells us that God accepted Maryam with a goodly acceptance and made her grow in a good manner. And according to deeply rooted traditions, her mother's prayer for protection was answered in a spectacular way. Maryam and her future offspring were consecrated to God, protected right from the get-go, escaping the pricking of the devil at birth. This established this innate, unblemished purity that would literally define her entire existence. As she grew up, she was placed under the guardianship of her uncle, the revered prophet Zechariah, and she lived in a space known as the Mirage. Basically, this was a private sanctuary or prayer niche where she retreated from the outside world to devote every waking moment to the worship of God. Behind a veil, completely separated from her people, she cultivated a state of absolute purity and laser-like spiritual focus. And it was right here in this physical isolation that the miracles started happening. Just imagine the surprise of the prophet Zechariah. Whenever he entered the mihrab to check up on her, he'd find her with miraculous provisions. Scholars note that he would find summer fruits sitting right there with her in the dead of winter, and winter fruits during the blazing summer heat. It was sustenance provided without any earthly cause, a direct physical manifestation of God's favor. Stunned by these out-of-season fruits, Zechariah obviously asked her where they came from. Her faithful, unwavering response is captured perfectly. It is from God. Surely God provides for whom he wills without measure. This profound statement of absolute trust didn't just explain the food, it actually inspired the elderly prophet Zechariah right then and there to pray for his own miraculous child, which eventually led to the birth of John the Baptist. Her faith was quite literally contagious. Which brings us to part 2, the angelic annunciation, the encounter with Gabriel. This is a massive turning point in Surah 19. Maryam is secluded in an eastern place, behind her veil, perfectly content in her devotion. But suddenly the angel Gabriel appears to her. Now, he doesn't show up in some terrifying, otherworldly form. He actually takes the shape of a flawless, perfect man. Imagine being completely alone, entirely devoted to prayer, and suddenly a stranger is standing right there in your private sanctuary. Maryam's immediate reaction is so incredibly telling of her character. She doesn't ask who he is or, how he got past the doors. She instantly seeks refuge in the most merciful, telling him to fear God if he is righteous. Her very first instinct is just pure, devout reliance on divine protection. It is only then that Gabriel reveals his true identity and his earth-shattering purpose. He tells her, "I am only your Lord's messenger, to give you a pure boy." He delivers the glad tidings of a word from God. God's spirit would be breathed into her, and she, a chaste virgin who had rigorously guarded her purity her entire life, would conceive a child. And this brilliantly illustrates a beautiful parallel in the Quranic text. Both Zachariah and Maryam are presented with divine impossibilities. Zachariah wonders, how can I have a son when I'm old and my wife is barren? While Maryam wonders, how can I have a son when no man has touched me? It makes sense, right? Both mortals naturally question how the laws of nature can just be suspended like that. And to both of them, the divine answer is essentially exactly the same. God creates what he wills. When he decrees a matter, he simply says be, and it is. Part 3. The Ordeal, a childbirth in isolation. But knowing a miracle is from God doesn't magically erase the human, physical, and emotional toll it takes. We now transition to the profound trial of her miraculous pregnancy. Maryam had to leave her safe sanctuary, facing the agonizing reality of childbirth entirely alone. And she was burdened not just by the intense physical pain, but by the terrifying anticipation of what her community was going to say. The text captures her humanity in what is arguably one of the most empathetic moments in the Quran. Driven by the fierce pains of childbirth to the trunk of a palm tree, entirely alone, she cries out, "Alas, I wish I had died before this, and was a thing long forgotten." It's a moment of profound vulnerability and despair. She is this towering figure of faith, yet she experiences very real, raw human agony. But God doesn't abandon her. A voice calls out from below her, providing a stream of water and commanding her to shake the palm tree so fresh dates will fall down to comfort and sustain her. Let's move to see how this builds to her ultimate vindication. After finding that comfort, she takes the immensely courageous step to return to her people, carrying the infant Jesus, or Isa. And just as she feared, they immediately hurl harsh accusations at her, questioning her chastity, shaming her family line. But following divine instruction, she remains completely silent. She simply points to the infant in the cradle. And then the miracle unfolds. The newborn baby speaks, declaring himself a servant of God and a prophet, instantly clearing his mother's name and proving her divine innocence to everyone. Now, this incredibly unique status and her direct, undeniable interactions with the divine lead to a really fascinating, though often overlooked scholarly debate within Islamic traditions. Was Maryam actually a female prophet? Let's take a completely impartial look at what the sources say about this intriguing question. The textual evidence is certainly striking. The Quran explicitly states she received the Spirit, or Ruh, and the Word, Kalima, from God. Because she had direct, verified communication with the angel Gabriel, which is a major hallmark of prophetic revelation, some literalist scholars have strongly argued that she indeed holds the rank of a prophet. However, as the sources point out, historically and sociologically, this view has often not been widely accepted, primarily due to her sex. But whether one views her technically as a prophet or simply as the highest of saints, her spiritual rank is undeniably extraordinary. Part 4. A Sign for the Worlds, the Eternal Legacy. So the crucial point is her lasting impact. Maryam's story isn't just some historical account locked away in the text. It's presented as a living, breathing blueprint for spiritual excellence. This is captured beautifully in Surah 21, verse 91. "And she who guarded her chastity, then we breathed into her of our spirit, and we made her and her son a sign for the worlds." She is permanently elevated. She isn't just a sign for her specific community, or even just for her time, but a timeless symbol of virtue, obedience, and unbreakable faith for all believers across all worlds and eras. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to really ponder. We've seen her dedication, her miraculous provisions, her harrowing ordeal, and her ultimate triumph. If Maryam stands as the ultimate example of devotion against impossible odds, trusting God when nature, society, and even her own physical strength seem to be totally against her, what does her ancient story ask of our own faith today? How do we handle our own moments at the palm tree of despair? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning and keep learning.